Hey, how's it going, everybody? Ryan Hamilton here from the AI team at CircleCI. And today we're going to be running through 7 tips for effective system prompting, a developer's guide to building better AI applications. So the first tip we have is to take a multi-perspective approach. Just to demonstrate this, we're going to pull up circlet.ai, something that we've built here at CircleCI to use prompting to generate kind of features and applications for our end users. So the different perspectives that we're taking, we really want to kind of start with our end user. Where any prompting that we do of an LLM, of, kind of an AI model, we're doing it all for the end user. So let's just use this bedtime story creator prompt here. So we want to create an app. The whole reason that we're creating an app is for our end user. So we want to create an app that takes any topic in an age and years, then renders a 1-minute bedtime story for a person at that age. And again, we're doing a lot of this for the end user. So that's the first perspective that we're taking. The second perspective is really kind of, we're the ones doing the prompting. We're like the first person in the mix. The second person would be the model or the LLM that we're prompting to achieve the end for the end user. So again, just very quickly, taking different perspectives. There's us, there's our end user, and there's the model who's going to usher in the solution for that end user. Okay, so the second tip that we have is to focus on outcomes, not just instructions. So I think sometimes we have a tendency to really kind of layer on the instructions and the details, but I think it's very important, especially to follow up kind of the different perspectives that we're taking, to really consider the outcome that we want for the end user. So again, to revisit the prompt that we have on the screen here, create an app that takes a topic in an age and years, then renders a 1-minute bedtime story. That's really the outcome that we want. That's really kind of the end result that we want for our end user and, the end users of our users in this case. That's the outcome that we're really looking for. We want to render a 1-minute bedtime story based on these inputs. So we have a clear sense of what we want our users to input into the system and what the output that we expect from those inputs. Okay, so the third tip that we have is to build layered context. So layering meaning, kind of we're going to have a base layer. We're going to have some kind of business layer on top of that. And then, of course, on top of that, we're going to have a user layer for the users who are actually going to be using the applications that we're building. So the base layer here, again, we're starting very general. Create a 1-minute bedtime story about a specific topic for a person of a specific age. Well, say our business is specifically geared toward children. Maybe we might say something like, the user wants a 1-minute bedtime story about topic for a person of age. Please craft a captivating tale that captivates their imagination and provides delightful bedtime experience for children. So maybe we want to be very explicit about the fact that we're catering toward kind of a child-specific story. And then, of course, we can tweak things like age from there. Maybe we're dealing with a 6-year-old, or maybe, we can go older and maybe like 11-year-old. So being very specific about, the specific end user that we're expecting, within kind of a general business category of, hey, we're catering to children. So yeah, building layered context, being very general about kind of, the core requirements that we have, then layering in a little bit of the business expectations that we've got. And then, of course, being very specific about the end user, in this case, the specific age category of the end user that we're catering to. So the fourth tip that we have is to include explicit validation criteria. And so when we have prompts and we generate output based on those prompts, we have certain expectations, certain things that we're looking for, certain expectations against which we're going to validate the output of the model. So in this case, we have, create a 1-minute bedtime story for a child of a certain age about a specific topic. One expectation that we might have is like, well, hey, look, if we're generating a story for a person at 7 years old about magical creatures, look, make sure that it's within the bounds of a story that would be acceptable and appropriate for a person of 7 years old about magical creatures. Certainly don't use profanity, don't use topics, and don't use maybe word choices that might completely exceed their level of education, stuff like that. So we can be very explicit about some of that validation criteria. So again, if we're expecting a 1-minute bedtime story, we could say things like, do not exceed 1 minute of story length when dictated, or something like that. We could say other stuff like, hey, make it absolutely appropriate for a person of this age, something like that. Be very specific about kind of what you expect from the output and what you're really evaluating for. So the next tip that we have is to use very consistent terminology. And this may go without saying, it may be a little obvious, but even in this example that we have here, where we're repeating the term age here and here, being very specific about the terminology and what we're calling specific objects within our prompts. We're calling the story topic a topic, a quote unquote topic. Say we repeat that and we're expecting, our output to adhere to that topic. One of our expectations might be to say the story topic must adhere to the topic, something like that. So the story topic must adhere to the topic. Again, repeating the terminology and the specific objects and noun choices and variable choices that we're using in the prompts to make sure that not only are we using consistent terminology in terms of, what we're calling specific nouns and objects within our prompts, but we're doing that not only to, reinforce that to ourselves, to not confuse ourselves and say, hey, well, what do we call this thing? Or, is it topic or is it, subject? Like being very specific about the terminology that we're using to coin certain nouns and objects within our prompts is very important. Not only for ourselves, but for the model, but also when it comes to later on evaluating the outputs of those models, we can be very specific about evaluating specific things. In this case, making sure that the output adheres to a certain, in this case, topic, and that it's appropriate for a person of a specific, quote unquote age. So be very specific about kind of the objects and the variables and the nomenclature that you're giving things within your prompts. And being very consistent about that is extremely important. The sixth tip that we have is implementing guardrails and fallbacks. Again, here, it's extremely important when we get output from a model that it's adhering to the guidelines and the guardrails and the boundaries that we're expecting from them. In this case, like if we're generating a 1-minute bedtime story for a child, don't use profanity, obvious stuff. Stay within the bounds of something that is acceptable. And if the output kind of falls outside of those bounds, you need to make sure that you're handling those edge cases appropriately. So, my gosh, if you notice maybe some profane content coming out of the model, maybe handle that error case in your application, or even in your prompt, make sure that you're doing something to catch that and to keep the output really within the bounds that you're expecting. Okay, so the seventh and final tip that we've got is to iterate and refine. This may be absolutely obvious because, when we start off prompt engineering, or even if we're well-seasoned prompt engineers, we're not going to get things perfect the first time. So like any software engineering that's ever really existed, iterating fine tuning, repeating, making sure that you're testing things, kicking the tires, finding edge cases, and really just, putting something out there, testing it, reevaluating it, evaluating it, iterating on it, re-kicking the tires, refinding edge cases, just doing all that iterative stuff that is required to get things right. Again, that practice has really always existed in engineering, but certainly for prompt engineering, when we're getting kind of unpredictable output from a model that, given a certain input, you really don't know what you're going to get, it becomes even more important to evaluate, iterate, fine tune, tweak things, reevaluate, and to really iterate until you get something that's really tightly within the bounds of output that you're expecting from your models. So yeah, iteration is absolutely key.